Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Al Carroll, and I'm the University Activation Senior Manager at TechPoint, the nonprofit, industry-led growth accelerator for Indiana's tech ecosystem. In my time working at TechPoint, I've learned that a thriving tech ecosystem requires talented, innovative entrepreneurs activating capital, accessing capital, and to grow their business or start new ones. However, the conversations with Black and Brown founders is all too familiar. In fact, of the $136.5 billion venture capital dollars invested in tech in 2019, only 1% went to Black founders. Now, this likely isn't news for the people watching, but it is unacceptable. Today's conversation will focus on more than tech. Our illustrious panelists are here to discuss challenges to getting started, but the bulk of our conversations will focus on how minority entrepreneurs can access resources that we need to compete. Please feel free to interact with us using the chat, and we'll certainly get to audience questions throughout. We'll kick off the conversation with brief introductions, starting with my friend Amna Sohail. In your introduction, tell us what you believe is the biggest challenge facing minority entrepreneurs in Indiana today. Amna?
Great. Thanks, Al, for starting us off. Hi, everyone. My name is Amna Sohail. I'm currently a senior analyst on the investment team at Elevate Ventures. It's a private venture development organization that focuses generally investing at the pre-seed, seed, and early stage growth levels for Indiana-based companies across a variety of sectors from life sciences to tech, advanced manufacturing, just to name a few. Prior to that, I worked on the corporate innovation and business design team at High Alpha. It's a B2B SaaS venture studio. I've grown up here in Indiana, and I've really been optimistic about the potential we have to lift entrepreneurship across diverse communities in our state, and excited to be here today. I think one area that I want to see more improvement is just access to capital for all of our diverse entrepreneurs here.
Wonderful. Let's go to Val.
I am Val Crooke, originally from a little island in the Caribbean called St. Kitts, born and raised, moved to the United States for university, and met my wife and stuck around. I am a partner at an organization called BoxScore. We are essentially a real-time feedback tool, really just to drive engagement within organizations. And so one of the things I want to see from an entrepreneurship side in our community really is making it a dinner time discussion so that it's a real opportunity in people's minds as it pertains to building and growing your own business.
Wonderful. Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Maliqi, and I focus on outreach and marketing for the U.S. Small Business Administration. It's a federal government agency that's been around since 1953, and we help small businesses and entrepreneurs to start, grow, expand, and recover. A big challenge we see when we have people calling in to SBA or reaching out to us is they just don't know what they don't know, often due to a lack of access points to information.
And then Kaliah.
So hi, I'm Kaliah Ligon with Forward Cities. I serve as the local director for community entrepreneurship. Forward Cities is a national nonprofit focused on building more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. And here in Indianapolis, that specifically looks like supporting Black and Brown entrepreneurs in three distinct areas of our city. So the near west areas of Hallville and Hawthorne, the northwest area of Riverside and the MLK corridor, and the northeast area, those neighborhoods would be Martindale, Brightwood, and the Meadows. And so for me, what I'd most like to see for entrepreneurs in Indianapolis, especially for Black and Brown entrepreneurs who I work with, is that they have better connections and relationships that can lead them to the opportunities that they need, and that they really have more visibility and be seen as entrepreneurs. Whether they embrace that title themselves or not is something else to be determined, but that ultimately the ecosystem will see them and support them in the ways that they need.
Fantastic. So we'll stay with you, Kaliah. So as you work with founders who are looking to get their ideas off the ground, what are some common issues that befall businesses regardless of who starts them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of businesses who in the initial stages, attempt to do some bootstrapping because, the finances aren't there. Banks don't typically lend to people who haven't really proved a business model or had some time under their belt and filed a couple of years worth of taxes. So I think, there are a lot of folks who, put their business expenses on credit cards, who may take out a second mortgage on a house if they own one. And of course, there's also the issue of like, what legal entity do you want to set up as? Do you want to be an LLC? Should you be a sole proprietorship, S Corp? And then just understanding all that language and terminology. A lot of businesses get into business because they have a great idea. They have maybe a passion project that they realize that they can make some money from. But the administrative paperwork, record keeping, the marketing, developing e-commerce opportunities is something that's a little more challenging. It takes a different set of skills. It usually takes a whole team. So businesses being able to find that team to put together to help them take not just their idea and bring it to fruition, but to be able to support the actual business aspect as well, are I think some of the major challenges of someone really getting started up.
Yeah. Lindsay, do you want to jump in? I want to get you in there. Can you add some to those thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, totally what Kaliah is saying all the way. We talk to a lot of folks starting up who are really good at making widgets, or they're really good at the service that they provide, but they're not so strong on the business management side. So we see a lot of steps that are skipped. Like a lot of the calls we get, they want to know about where are those startup grants for small businesses, and there are none through SBA. There are a few out there in private and nonprofit worlds, but they're kind of few and far between. So the next question is, well, how do I get a loan? Like, I want to get a loan. And it's like, well, okay, let's, go back a bit. Do you have a business plan? Have you run those financial projections? Do you have your team, like Kaliah's saying, to support you, to help you get through those steps to becoming bankable? So we see it a lot on the cap access side, which is where I'm coming from an SBA standpoint. So getting those plans and projections in place.
So as we think about funding, and we know that funding is a primary issue that we continue to hear is a barrier to entrepreneurship in our communities. Amna, as a funding representative, what makes a company ready for investment? And then to maybe perhaps Lindsay's point that sometimes you don't know what you don't know, how do you know when you're ready?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally, from an investment standpoint, there are a few key criteria that investors are looking at. And I'm speaking more from, seed stage, early stage growth, but I think these criteria generally apply. And so we're looking at, team, product, market, customer, and return. From a team standpoint, we're looking to see, do you have a strong team that has complementary skills? They have subject matter expertise. Generally looking to see, do those founders have previous experience in starting up a business or growing a business? Are they coachable? From a market standpoint, we're looking to see, is there a clear understanding of the competitive landscape and how that company is going to, differentiate itself? What is its competitive advantage? We want to see an understanding from the team, in terms of how big is their total addressable market, and is that market growing? What is their wedge to market? Why does the timing make sense now? And do they have a reasonable, scalable business and revenue model? From a customer standpoint, we're looking to see, do they have ideal customer targets identified? Do they have some sense of, how they're going to go about selling, marketing, and eventually retaining customers? And then from, product standpoint, we're looking for a clear understanding of the value proposition that's differentiated in the market. Do they have a product roadmap that has been validated with customer feedback and specific milestones? Do they understand what customer pain point they're solving for and how they're going to create user engagement over time? And lastly, return. We're looking to see, do they have reasonable market, informed investment terms and other investors who are interested? So that those are all those criteria together help us see, a company that's ready for investment. And generally earlier on, team is super important. That's going to be a strong factor earlier on when you're pre-revenue.
So again, how do you know when you're ready?
Yeah, so a lot of those factors, I would say, when you have all those ingredients in place is when when you're ready. Generally, again, going back to, when you have a strong team in place, you have some traction, you've gone out, you've validated your solution, customers are willing to purchase and buy it. Having all those things in place informs that you have an opportunity that is ready to scale and grow. And I think that kind of, transitions on to the thought of now, I think you might ask me next, like, what are some of those challenges, right, for diverse entrepreneurs in navigating this, right?
Yeah.
If I can jump in, I mean, I love what Amna said. I think one of the things, at least for us at Box Score, the idea that we were, at that point where we were ready to grow, we were ready to scale, and we thought, okay, it's time to kind of go after some investment now. And so for us, what Amna said, there was a lot there. And it seems super complicated, and it is to an extent fairly complicated. However, I think that knowledge piece in our community is where some of that gap is, right? What's that roadmap look like, and where do we even start? But once you start, then things start falling into place, as Amna referred to.
So let me stick with you, Val, here. So how much does general financial literacy play a role in how diverse entrepreneurs navigate the entrepreneurial ecosystem here?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that, but I can say you just have to start, man. You just have to start. And as you walk through the process, you bring guys around you that would kind of help you kind of make some of those decisions. Right. So I think it's more important to have the right guys on your team and or around you helping from a mentorship standpoint than it is knowing what does that look and feel like in regards to finances, money, raising money, and so forth. Right. Hey, let's build a nice team. You have a good idea. Let's build a nice team around what you're trying to accomplish. And let's go step by step and walk through those processes.
All right, we have our first audience question. It might go back a little bit to Amna, but what are the opportunities and factors or criteria for social entrepreneurs to make them ready for investment? So social entrepreneur being ready for investment, same as consumer-based businesses. Is it the same as consumer-based businesses, or is it different for constituent-based businesses?
Yeah, so I would say I haven't had as much experience necessarily looking at social entrepreneurship, type companies, or even really consumer-led businesses. But I would say in general, when you're approaching, an investor, I think having some certain things in a row, like having all your ducks in a row in terms of, you have a strong team around you, as Val and Kaliah and Lindsay have talked about. You've shown some traction, right? You've actually had good customer feedback. You're starting to sell something, until you get your first customer or your first purchase order or whatever that might look like. If you don't have that, that doesn't necessarily show you have that product market fit. So until you have some of those signals, you're not quite, ready to necessarily approach an investor. And also just being able to clearly articulate, this is what I'm doing is different in the market, and it's serving an unmet need because of X, Y, or Z, right? It's until you can actually articulate all those things together, that's what you need to make yourself investor ready. And it will look different for different companies, whether you're a B2C company, a B2B company, you have a social enterprise you're working on. But generally, a lot of the criteria that I talked about, from the team, product, market, customer standpoint, like all those things tend to still be relevant no matter what business you're working on.
Very good. So private equity funding isn't the only way that diverse founders can face obstacles. So Kaliah, can you share with me a little bit more information about challenges folks might face getting general business loans?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's it's kind of mystified, right? A lot of folks just don't know a whole lot about it. And unless you know folks who have maybe had business loans, you're really kind of starting out in the dark. So I think that's one. Of course, you ideally would have a banking relationship and, have developed a relationship perhaps with, some of the bank staff at your local branch if you're, using a physical branch. Of course, you need to have, there's an expectation that you'll have some good record keeping as well. So, do you understand your cash flows? And is it enough cash flow to support a repayment of a loan on a monthly basis whenever those terms begin for repayment? I think there are still some challenges, honestly, depending on your product offering, that your loan officer and perhaps even the underwriter may not understand your business and the customer and the base that you're trying to serve and why, because there is some bias related to, making those types of decisions where they're humans, just like the business owner is. And there could just be some cultural competence differences as well. I think a lot of times folks don't necessarily know what they need in terms of a personal credit score and may not have established any business credit as well. And then I would go so far to say, as you know, in some cases you need some collateral. And so if you don't have, those things as a part of the recipe, it can be difficult in many cases to get large business loans that can support the growth of your business.
So when all else fails, right, bootstrapping is an option. Val, I know that you shared that you're bootstrapping your current venture. Was that the plan all along? And I know you also just mentioned that you were working on trying to get some funding there too. So can you talk to us a little bit more about the challenges that you're facing raising capital from entities that maybe aren't banks or venture capital, and maybe a little bit more about your experience?
No, absolutely. I think, like Amna was saying, there's so many factors that lead up to the point where you're ready, right? You never feel like you're really ever ready. All right. And so for us, what we're trying to accomplish at BoxScore is really just adding customers to the portfolio, right? And so as we add customers to the portfolio, that makes us obviously a lot more attractive. From a bootstrapping standpoint, it is what it is. Like I said, you have to do what you have to do. You have to put your money where your mouth is. It's one of those things where Patrick and we built the product piece by piece. We couldn't do everything all at once. And so we built the product piece by piece. And as we need to add features to the product, we do so. But right now, the goal is how many customers can I add to my portfolio? And so kind of that's where we are right now.
Very good. So I think that we've talked a lot about the issues, but let's talk about some solutions, right? I think that's what we're all really hoping to get out of this conversation. So I'm going to go to Lindsay. The SBA has many options for starting businesses of all types. So can you talk to us a little bit about about the work that your office does and what opportunities are available through your office for diverse founders?
I can talk to you about it a bit, but I'll try to condense it into a few minute version. So as I mentioned, the SBA helps small businesses and entrepreneurs start, grow, expand, and recover. So we're kind of here to focus on that start piece today. But we have been doing a lot on the recovery side, obviously, here lately. So I did want to touch on that briefly. So the Small Business Administration, through our private lending partners, have given out over 5 million PPP loans. And there was over $130 billion left over in that program. So stay tuned on what might be coming from Congress and from the President's office on updates on that program. I know our regional administrator, Rob Scott, was on yesterday, and he talked a lot about that. I did want to mention with that particular program, and any government program in general, we always give you the option of reporting demographic information. We had a really, really low turnout for that for the PPP loans, and I understand part of that might have been just like the nature of the crisis. But, I agree that there are ways that SBA and Treasury and federal government can do better to make sure that those dollars are getting to where they need to go, especially in our underserved communities. But with only 25% of the PPP loans reporting demographics, it's hard to make the case for that. So I definitely encourage you, anytime you have the opportunity, to let us know who's getting, where those dollars are going. But back to the start piece. So if you're at square one and you are working through some of those items like Kaliah was mentioning, like, what legal structure, location considerations, tax considerations, things like that, we've got 10 steps to start your business on our website at sba.gov. So that's a really good place just to start to kind of figure out what you need to know to get started. And then we've got local business assistance available around the country at no cost to help you kind of go through some of those steps with a business advisor one-on-one. So at SBA, we help support women's business centers. We've got 2 in Indiana and several around the country. Our veteran business outreach centers located around the country. Our SCORE volunteer mentors. So they kind of have a lot of people think of them as the retired executives who are coming back in their free time to give out advice, but it's not all retired guys anymore. Their mentor base has diversified quite a bit. So, you might find someone who ran a business or is running a business similar to yours, or if you need specialized assistance in, accounting or legal, something like that, they've got mentors from a variety of backgrounds. And statewide and nationwide, we also have our small business development center networks. So all of these organizations, are a little different, but are all providing no-cost localized business assistance. And so that's one-on-one confidential assistance to help you generally through those startup steps. They're a great sounding board. We also work with micro-lending partners that also provide technical assistance and have kind of step-up programs to help businesses on the road to becoming bankable. So our microlenders have credit builder programs to help on that front. They can offer microloans backed by the SBA up to $50,000. And we actually have what we call our Community Advantage loan program, and that is up to $250,000 specifically for small businesses in underserved communities. So that program is just for the underserved business owners and businesses. And then so as we're kind of stepping up, you've got your business assistants to help with your plan, you've got your credit builder and your microloan programs, and then you're kind of working your way up to becoming bankable. But sometimes there's still, each lender has their own blend of herbs and spices, like Kaliah said, their recipe in terms of lending, but we provide credit enhancements or government guarantees from the SBA to help reduce the risk for the private lender to make loans up to $5 million. And so that can translate to the borrower to lower down payments or longer repayment terms or things like that. So that's what the lending options kind of are at SBA. I know we have a lot of techie kind of people on the line, so I just did want to mention also that we do SBA helps coordinate among the different federal agencies, different non-dilutive R&D grant opportunities. So if you're in more of that innovative sector and you're working on something that's of interest to the federal government, there are grants available to help you through that. And there aren't any set-asides, what we would call for that, for underserved communities, but we do provide grants to organizations to do technical assistance to help small business owners in underserved communities write their applications for those grants. So the NIC, the Northeast Innovation Center up in Fort Wayne, is one of those technical assistance providers, and they're working on coordinating a road tour, which is usually in person, but now it's going to be online to help provide networking opportunities. So those R&D and prototyping type businesses can network with the federal agencies who are doling out those grant funds. So that's coming up in October.
That's fantastic.
As far as specific, yeah.
Yeah, I want to.
I've got a couple more, but if you need to cut me off, that's fine.
I want to come back to them, but I just want to make sure that as we are going through these, and I hopefully everybody else is making as many notes as I am about all of these great opportunities. But as folks are, if you have any more specific questions here, please know that the Q&A is open, and we are definitely going to make sure that to ask audience questions. So I apologize for cutting you off there, but I do want to work Kaliah in as well. Because I know you're doing some fantastic work in the communities that you serve as well. So I want to pull you into this conversation too, Kaliah.
Yeah. So I think you were asking about just how do we get more funding out? Is that correct, Al?
Yes, and just general resources. So resources that you're bringing to the table to help minority entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So
get what they need.
So I'll let you get your ears back in. But generally speaking, what Forward Cities has been doing, we have a really great group of individuals who serve as our innovation council. So I have 35 plus individuals from all different walks of life and experience as entrepreneurs or entrepreneur support organizations, helping to guide the work of Forward Cities. And we have been talking with entrepreneurs about what they need and how to best serve their needs. We did an entrepreneur assembly in partnership with the Kepler Institute last May so that we could hear directly from entrepreneurs about their concerns and the challenges that they're experiencing We've also done an entrepreneur survey that is actually on round 2 as we speak. And so if you want to learn more about that, you may email me at kligon, that's Ligon, at forwardcities.org. I'd be happy to share that entrepreneur survey with you. We're providing a $25 Etsy gift card for anyone who completes that survey and is eligible to complete it. So happy to do that. But generally speaking, we created 3 pilot projects, or MVSs. And so our pilot projects, again, were to serve the neighborhoods that I mentioned earlier. We created, in partnership with the Kepler Institute and Edna Martin Christian Center, the Entrepreneur Hub co-work pilot. It was to be what we referred to as a culturally affirming co-work space. And it is, or was, because it was a pilot, located at 3802 North Illinois Streets. I know we had a lot of buzz and a lot of people trying to figure out what's happening in that building right there. It's highly visible in the corner of Illinois and 38th Street. We had a 4-week run with well over 100 folks who came through to use the entrepreneur space, check it out, connect with other entrepreneurs, get connected to resources, participate in workshops, etc. Our second pilot project was a marketing business support project. So we provided small grants to entrepreneurs who needed support in getting some basic marketing pieces set up. You know, I would go to different pop-ups and events, in part because I like to shop, but I also wanted to see what our entrepreneurs had to offer. And, you know, I was finding just a whole litany of different types of, you know, business cards and presents. And, you know, in some cases, I knew how to get back in touch with entrepreneurs. In some cases, their business cards didn't necessarily state how I could stay connected. And so seeing that was a challenge, we knew that we needed to be able to provide some support in that way. And then our final pilot project is to support Black and Brown entrepreneurs in particular with access to capital. So we've partnered with BOI at the Indy Chamber to provide small business loans or micro loans of up to $5,000 to entrepreneurs who are, you know, needing to purchase a piece of equipment or need, you know, just some of the raw resources to make that next sale or to get that next deal done. So we're super excited about that one. And we had already done a soft launch and loaned out, I think, about $25,000 through that particular program. And there is still some more funds available. So I'll be sharing that information out with an appropriate flyer and some of those things to entrepreneurs in those communities.
Very good. So one of the comments that's come up in the chat is on mentorship. And I know, Val, this is something you talked a lot about as we were preparing for this. So mentorship and networks is something that I know you're passionate about. So how can we break into the spaces that weren't built for us and get the resources that we need to succeed? So for Val.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I mean, you know, that whole idea of success in entrepreneurship, a lot of that, I think, hangs and lies on mentorships, connections, the phone calls that are made, the emails that are sent, and those intangibles are absolutely essential. All right, and it just comes. It comes with the territory, right? And so, you know, how I have kind of handled it is it's all about building and creating intentional relationships. Right. So I work out of a co-working space on the north side of town called Launch Fishers. And I'm a part of that Launch Fisher team as well. And so, you know, just for an example, in regards to how this box score thing came about, I was telling my good friend, John Wexler, about an idea I had because of an experience that I had with a previous employer. And so, and I was just telling him, man, if organizations could only create a culture where you feel valued and appreciated, that is the win right there. Guys will bend over backwards for you. And so I was telling him about a tool that I thought I wanted to build to help kind of drive that process. And he says, you know what? I have a good friend that's building something right now that's fairly similar. Let me connect you. So he connected me to Patrick Burke. Patrick and I met at Starbucks. I mean, it's unbelievable how that conversation went, because it was like we had the same experiences. the same types of things that happen within organizations. He had a very similar idea. And we said, instead of doing this solo by ourselves, let's just collaborate and let's make this thing happen. And so it just speaks to this whole idea of relationships. It speaks to the idea that John Wexler was willing to say, hey, I want you to meet Patrick. Sent an email to Patrick. Patrick said, hey, let's get together. We sat, talked, and that was history. So that's just a quick example of kind of what that process looks like for me. So that intentionality on John's side to make introductions, the intentionality on my side to share my idea, right? Ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is the key. Don't be scared to tell people what you're trying to accomplish, what you're doing, what you're working on, right? Those things are important because that's how those connections are made. It's hardly likely someone's going to take it and go do it, right? And so I like to say, feel free to share your ideas, share what you're doing, share what you're working on, because the relationships that could potentially come from that will make a difference in your success.
So I hear Kaliah talking about the kind of pop-up co-working space project that you did and how valuable that was for people. And I hear you talking about how a connection at Launch Fishers made the difference for you here and how you are starting your business. How do we bring those places together? Where are those places where minority founders like Val can go? And maybe it is Launch Fishers, right? But if it's if our co-working space is only it's a pop-up spot for where, but we know that we need something like that because that's where our founders feel comfortable, right? Like how do we bridge that gap? How do we bring those two together? And maybe where maybe are some of those things happening that maybe we don't know about?
Yeah, I mean,
for everybody, Val. So I mean,
yeah. No, feel free. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to share. I'm hoping that maybe there's a few angel investors on the line who might have an interest in continuing to develop spaces like that. But generally speaking, a lot is already happening in spaces that are not necessarily designated for that, right? So you met Denzil met Patrick at Starbucks. A lot of deals are being done in Starbucks already. Deals are being done and people are connecting at Cleo's Bodega or Tease Me, downtown, or duos. I mean, people are meeting and connecting wherever they can, wherever there's a free place to sit in a lot of cases, especially when you're in startup mode. You may not be ready for, a membership at an official co-work space, but, other co-work spaces, of course, like Launch Fishers include, places like the Speakeasy, who are definitely making people feel welcome. And so people, I think, are showing up wherever they feel good, wherever they feel like they're welcomed and they're going to get connected to people who are going to have the skill sets that they're looking for, or people who are just friendly and looking forward to sharing, and not afraid that someone's, potentially going to steal ideas. So yeah, I think people are showing up wherever they can.
I mean, I really think there's a ton of value in co-working spaces. For me, being around like-minded folks that are driven to create and build ideas that they're working on, that's inspiring in and of itself. I think some of the benefit that I've received from places like that are obviously introductions, right? Connections, but other entrepreneurs all entrepreneurs, for example, at a Launch Fishers and or a Speakeasy and so forth. My business partner works out at Speakeasy and I work out of Launch Fishers, right? But a lot of times, one of the things that I like to talk to is the fact that entrepreneurs, we're all in different life cycles of our business. So when I say, hey, Brad, how did you do this? He says, hey, here's the mistake I made. Here's what I think you should do. And guys are willing to tell you not what you want to hear, right? But hey, here's what I did. Don't do that. You can, but here are the obstacles I ran into. Go this direction. And so that's what relationships do for you. Those are the intangibles that you get. I wanted to add one other thing. I met with the launch team before this conference, and I asked John Wexler, I said, hey, John, can I have 10 memberships for some Black and brown minority guys to come in, work out of launch for a year, build their businesses, and let's be intentional about walking through that process. He says, man, whatever you want, that's good. So definitely we can reach out to the team here and figure out how to get into contact with me, and I'll make sure that, you know, something happens along those lines.
So that's quite the offer. I know that we had one question in the chat about cheap places to go, or if there are affordable places to go. I can tell you right now, you're not going to get any better than free. So please work with Val here to get that, to take advantage of that. There's fantastic work going on up at Launch Fishers, and we should be in the room and be a part of it as well. So that's fantastic, Val. Thanks for doing that. So in that same spirit, what are some of the other types of changes that we need to see as a community? And maybe as you're thinking of those changes, as we're sharing them, like, whose responsibility is it to make those changes, right? Or, you know, is it incumbent upon us? Is it incumbent upon some of the spaces that we don't necessarily feel welcome in to change? I think the answer is going to be both, but let's maybe include that in your answer. And Amna, we haven't heard from you in a while, so can we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I actually had a couple of thoughts just to share, especially when it comes to, like, you know, the access to capital. How do we put more dollars to work in diverse entrepreneurs? I think this touches a little bit on, you know, what Val was talking about with those intentional relationships. I think one thing, you know, especially for those who have the ability to write checks and invest in funders, I think needing to be more intentional about diversifying our sourcing networks, our personal networks, right? I think, you know, that entails being intentional about building relationships with communities of color and meeting them where they are. So I think one thing I'd share here is, you know, when you consider when an investor is hearing a pitch, you know, they're generally referencing all the past deals that they've seen before. And if you're not used to meeting diverse entrepreneurs, you may not have a frame of reference for the type of market opportunity they're presenting. So, you know, as a consequence of that, I think what can happen is you tend to invest in companies that you've seen before, with people that you already know, or that might already run in your circle. So again, we have to be intentional about getting out of our circle of comfort and finding people who do not look like us, who don't sound like us, and really being intentional about meeting diverse entrepreneurs and learning from investors who are investing in diverse companies, because they are out there, right? I think a second piece I would add to that, just kind of focusing on this lens, just from like the funding investor perspective, I think the other piece to consider is that I think mentoring is super key. But, you know, something that stood out to me that I've been hearing a lot, you know, frequently, is that diverse entrepreneurs are over-mentored and under-invested. And I think mentorship is incredibly key, but we have to make an intentional effort to not just mentor, but also lead those entrepreneurs, to a path to investment. And the third piece I'll add, just because I've been thinking a lot about this, is that, you know, we have to have diversity represented at the decision-making level, right? So when it comes to those investment firms, you know, do we have diverse partners, principals, like investment team members, right? Because if you look at the statistics today, you know, we're aware, I think about 2% of partner level VCs are Black. 81% of VC firms, you know, don't have Black VCs. 7% of, you know, women of color represent VCs, and it's only 1% of Black women, right? The statistics are dismal. And so we have to make more intentional effort to have diversity, you know, at the decision-making table, because with diversity, you know, we actually have more diverse perspectives represented, and we can also tap into more unique networks that way. And lastly, I think we got to start tracking our progress, right? Without having metrics to be intentional about it, we don't know, you know, where are the gaps and where are we moving forward. So I know I just said a lot,
you are
but
making
a lot of
me
those
smile.
things.
Amna, you are making me smile, man. I
Yes.
love everything you just said. And you are absolutely right. And I just want to say thank you for sharing that, and then continue sharing that in those circles that you're running in, because that's what makes a difference at the end of the day, because people really don't know. Thank you tons, Amna.
For sure.
I would add how I think the question was kind of like what needs to change. And so, you know, obviously, you know, entrepreneurship doesn't exist in a bubble. Like, it sometimes seems like it does, but, you know, it's still a part of this broader world. And so obviously, you know, we're kind of in a whole world of trouble and challenge right now between the pandemic, you know, political divides, racial unrest, and injustices that are perpetually suffered, and more so now in front of cameras for the world to see. I think ultimately, in order to really, get the change that we want in the entrepreneurial ecosystems for all business owners, but especially for people of color, the groundwater has to be changed. It needs to be a situation where everyone can grow and thrive. It's difficult to be an entrepreneur and to see people who look like you who are murdered, by the police, or murdered by their neighbors for jogging through a neighborhood, or taking their kids to the park, or bird watching. Or just all of these injustices that we suffer each and every day, whether they end in death or they just make you feel really bad and really make you angry. Looking at what is kind of taking place, in our culture, does have an impact on the outputs, the ideas that are generated by people of color in particular. It's very difficult to, dream as high as you can when you're constantly under, a state of oppression and, having been told, over and over that what you're doing, what you look like, how you behave, how you dress is not good enough. I'm so grateful for the people of color entrepreneurs who, push past all the barriers that have been put in front of them, who have developed coping skills and mechanisms to help them grow and thrive. But imagine what it would look like if our world were just better for people of color. So the onus is on all of us to continue to do that work, to speak out, to, be very intentional with our vote, and to really just, do better as humans in supporting other human beings. So I think that there's a lot of work, and, I'm grateful for the work that I get to do, but I recognize too that, some of it feels just like Band-Aids, and it does feel very temporary because we do have to really change the groundwater that we're all drinking from to start with.
Wow. I just so appreciate all of the conversation here that we've had. We're getting down to the wire here on our time. So I just want to ask one last question. I know that we talked about this as we prepped, but my father always said, don't complain, compete. And that's something that I really, truly believe in. And we know that these things that we've discussed that are issues, they're not going to change overnight. So what is your advice to people that have to leave this conference and go and compete in the marketplace tomorrow? What's your direct advice and maybe your last words for the audience?
I'll go first if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
One of the things my dad always said, so I'm glad you brought that up, is failure is not final, right? And so that has stuck with me. I have remembered that. That has driven me to just keep going. The idea that failure is not final, it's just a part of the process, right? So I just want to leave you with that final thought.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I think for me, just kind of thinking about what Val just said, about what his father taught him, my mom and dad always taught me, I deserve to be in that room just as much as anyone else. And I have the ability to ask questions and to, speak my mind. And so I think that those are things that are really important, regardless of which side of the table you're on. You could be the investor, you can be the one who's seeking investment. You have a right to be in that room, and you can, ask questions, and you can, speak your piece about what's important to you and what you need. Not every deal is going to be the right deal, but ultimately, if you can leave that, feeling like you've created perhaps a win-win, if that's what's important to you, then do that.
I would just say, don't let anyone get in the way of your momentum, and know that there are people out there who want to see you succeed. Surround yourself with those people and focus on what's going to drive your business forward. And in that journey, don't forget to take care of yourself, your mental health, practice self-care, because entrepreneurship is not easy, right? It's meant to be a marathon, not a sprint. So always keep that in mind.
Yeah, plan your work and work your plan. There are still a lot of brilliant ideas out there yet to come to fruition. And there are a lot of community partners out there who, like Amna said, want to see you succeed.
It's fantastic. Thank you all so much for your time. I do just want to say a special thank you to our sponsors, the Indie Chamber, Goldman Sachs, and 10,000 Business Initiatives. Thank you all so much for your time. I know, like me, these folks are on LinkedIn. They have all connected with me. I'm sure that they would all be interested in connecting with you. I do see that there was some talk in the chat about some of the other resources that I unfortunately didn't let Lindsay get back to and finish. And I know that she said that she is willing to have those conversations. So again, thank you all so much for your time. And we are all really grateful for the opportunity to come and share. So again, thank you. And with that, I will end now.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Take care, everyone.